person that's been a long time. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, the genealogy stuff gets pretty crazy in there, and has gotten even crazier. Alex, best wishes. Wow, that's cool. Small world. Real straight, you know. Thank you so much for coming.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to this event, Small Talk at FHI. And I'll start with a brief explanation of the title of the series. In 1970, Gil Scott-Heron released his very first studio album. It's called Small Talk at 125th Street. And if you're familiar with the album, it's an album that does not have a lot of musical accompaniment. So unlike the kind of jazzy arrangements that we think of and percussive arrangements that we think about Gil Scott-Heron's recordings, it's very sparse. It was an album that was recorded to reproduce a certain kind of intimacy. And what we are attempting to do with the series, and this is a follow-up from the beginning of the series last year, which was Small Talk at Rofhiwa, it's an opportunity to bring folks in and have a more intimate discussion with an audience that's a little different from the standard work that we've done with Left of Black over the last 14 years. Left of Black is a video webcast that was founded at Duke University in 2010. From 2010 to 2020, it was housed at the John Hope Franklin Center for Interdisciplinary and International Studies. Since 2020, it's been housed here at the Franklin Humanities Institute. I want to thank, before we get started, our guest here today, Nabil Ayers, the author of My Life in the Sunshine, Searching for My Father and Discovering My Family. And we're gonna start by asking you to read.
All right, I'm gonna jump right in.
Jump right in.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm going to read something that I've never read before after many book events, so hopefully I won't stumble through it. But this is very early in the book, page 5, but for some very brief background, this is the night that my mother decides she wants to get pregnant with me. On April 27th, 1971, after leaving an event at the Baha'i Center, my mother insisted to her brother Alan that they visit Roy's nearby apartment. She wanted to try to get pregnant that night. It had been several months since my mother had seen Roy, so long that she worried he wouldn't remember her, or that he might be with another woman when they arrived. But when Roy opened the door, he welcomed them, both with long hugs. They spent the evening catching up in his sparsely furnished living room, discussing their lives in New York City and music. Alan had joined Roy on stage to perform a Miles Davis song a few months earlier. Then the power went out. Suspecting that the blackout wasn't citywide, Roy had a car take them to my mother's apartment. There, they continued to talk, but my mother's desire to get pregnant was at the forefront of her thoughts. When Alan fell asleep on the couch, my mother and Roy retired to the makeshift bedroom, separated by a thick homemade curtain, where she slept on a mattress on the living room floor. I don't know why I chose this part to read. That's a reason I've never read this one. There, my mother bluntly told Roy she really wanted to get pregnant with him. He agreed, but he also made it clear that if she did get pregnant, she'd be on her own. Roy had always been upfront with my mother. His career was on the rise, and he had no interest in a serious relationship. But my mother desperately wanted a baby with him, and this was her chance. My mother's memory has always astonished me. To this day, she can describe the percussive guitar strum that her neighbor, the folk singer Richie Havens, played in his impromptu apartment performances, and the way the sound traveled up the stairs to her apartment. She can recount with tactile detail the material with which she sewed the dress she wore on the night that she met Roy. And she can describe the thick curtains, cut from a gigantic Indian bedspread that separated her and Roy from Alan on the night I was conceived. But no amount of prodding gleaned any more information about her conversation with Roy on that night, the conversation that led to me. My mother insists that it was brief, that easy. Likewise, Alan's memories are not only consistent with my mother's, they're easily outweighed by his simple justification of the circumstances. It was New York City in the early 70s. Several weeks later, my mother started to experience the nausea and dizziness that confirmed what she already knew. That night with Roy had worked. She'd gotten pregnant. When she was 16 weeks along, my mother called Roy to tell him. It was a call she made out of courtesy more than anything else. Sure, there was a part of her that hoped he'd say, "I love you, let's raise our child together." But she also knew that wasn't realistic. And although that fantasy clouded her thinking, deep down, my mother knew that her own two-parent childhood, though perfect on paper with a brother and a house in the suburbs, had been far from perfect in real life. She knew that she could do a better job raising a child on her own. Roy reacted to the news with detachment, saying things like, "I'm so happy for you. That's great. That's what you wanted." His response confirmed what my mother had expected and what they'd agreed upon. She would raise me on her own. There was no attempt by either one of them to share me. My mother viewed a part-time father as far worse than no father at all. Despite the response being exactly what she expected, exactly what Roy agreed to the night they slept together, my mother was still in tears after the call. She felt rejected, and she had difficulty reconciling that feeling with the reality that she knew she had intentionally created. Later that night, though, my mother talked to Alan. He vowed to be present in my life. He assured her that she was going to have a happy, healthy baby and that they'd figure everything out. My mother had no money, but she was resourceful. She had Alan's emotional support, and more than anything, she was committed to being a good mother. After Alan calmed her down, my mother felt a deep sense of relief that she didn't have to share her baby with anyone. She didn't see Roy for the rest of her pregnancy. People have asked my mother how it felt that my father left her, and her response is always that he didn't leave her. She intentionally picked someone who was married to his career and was completely unavailable. She describes her pregnancy as something remarkably positive, something that happened because of love. People have also asked me how I feel about my mother's decision to have me, knowing that my father wouldn't be involved. Her decision was unquestionably selfish, one that would shape my entire life. But for a long time, rather than admitting that to anyone who asked, I focused on the positives. My mother took a huge risk, hoping that Roy's best qualities, his kindness, his talent, and his magnetism would transfer to me, and that I wouldn't inherit or experience what she saw as his worst qualities, his unreliability and his self-centeredness. But she never concerned herself with the variables she couldn't control. Instead, my mother set out to give me a wonderful childhood, raising me in safe, supportive environments and challenging the traditional definition of family. And for a long time, that was good enough for me until it wasn't.
Thank you for that. So for those who aren't aware, his father is Roy Ayers, a pretty well-known jazz artist who played with the who's who of folks early in his career, had a tremendous solo career. He might be described among some Black audiences as being Black famous.
As opposed to famous?
As opposed to, yeah. And it largely comes from the song that informs the title of your book, Everybody Loves the Sunshine, which, to put in some sort of historical context, was, to Black social life, Everything Loves the Sunshine was Before I Let Go, the Frankie Beverly version, before the Frankie Beverly song came out.
Everybody loves the sunshine. Sunshine. Folks get down in the sunshine. Ooh, sunshine. Folks get brown in the sunshine.
So if you were at a picnic, a barbecue, a house party, right, and you wanted everybody on the dance floor, Everybody Loves the Sunshine would be one of those songs that you would put on. You mentioned, and of course then it becomes sampled. Mm-hmm. Almost hundreds and seemingly thousands
and covered,
of times by hip-hop artists. Yeah. So it takes on a new generational life in the 1990s. And you actually opened the book sitting in a theater watching Straight Outta Compton,
Yeah.
right? The film about NWA and Dr. Dre, and it's that scene where he's sitting on his floor in his bedroom. The album was all over the place, and they focus in on your dad's album.
Yeah.
And you talk about your experience of seeing, knowing what's coming, and hearing it, and how it reverberated in your body in ways that it had never done so before. And at the same time, you're looking around wondering if anyone is watching you.
Hmm.
Recount how you process that moment.
That was crazy. I mean, I suppose now looking back, the way I felt about my father, I've still never had a relationship with him. I've met him a couple times, is sort of parallel to how I felt about the song, and that's why the book opens that way. So I think it's 2015, and at the time, I tried to get in touch with him.
And you a grown ass man.
Yeah, I'm in my
Right.
30s and 40s, yeah. And I got in touch with him once when I was about 35, had lunch with him. It was really great. But that was the first time that after that, he kind of wouldn't get back to me. And I finally started to become angry with him, which never existed before because of everything I just read. He was never missing. I had a great childhood and all that. But once I finally tried to connect with him and failed, that's when I started to feel bad about things for the first time. So this is one of the first times after that where I encounter the song. And I also have food poisoning and I'm tired and I feel sick and I'm in the movie theater. And, there are times when I do expect to hear it or maybe see him if I'm going to the right concert or the right thing. But this it just wasn't on my mind at all. And so I was sitting alone in a movie theater and it's the first scene. And it opens with that music, and you see all these records, and I'm like, oh, I know what's coming. And there's the cover, and then it's the Dr. Dre character just like sitting with headphones on, just loving it.
My life, my life, my life, my life in the sunshine. Everybody loves the sunshine.
And yeah, I really felt like this like sort of stomach turn and like, oh man, everyone here is looking at me. There's a spotlight. Everyone knows what's going on. Everyone's going to ask me how I feel about the song. And of course, obviously nobody knew anything or did anything, but that's what was going through my head at the time.
There's a way in which, part of the book is about the lack of relationship that you have with this well-known figure. But that figure actually is in the background of this story.
Mm-hmm.
This is a story about a young mixed race, a black man growing up with a love of music, right? Who throughout a lifetime is trying to find the right avenues to be able to express that love of music in a way
Right.
that can sustain you for a career. That you just happen to be Roy Ayers' son
Right.
is almost secondary to that story. You mentioned your Uncle Alan, right, who took on a father figure role, who himself was an experimental musician.
Yeah.
Talk a little
Still
bit
is.
about your
Yeah.
your uncle and what his role played in terms of making music a part of your life.
Yeah. I mean, everything. I mean, we're still very close. He was 20 when I was born. He's incredibly healthy, and both he and my mother never drank, never did drugs, both like dancers and athletes. So he's very with it, incredible memory that helped so much with these stories. I mean, he's the one who bought me a drum set when I was 2.5 years old, which is, there's the nature versus nurture thing. My father is, of course, a very talented musician, but I never hung out with him. I got his DNA. My uncle bought me drums, bought me records, took me to concerts, literally played music with me for hours sometimes, in a day. So our relationship, aside from the sort of definite father figure thing, was so musical to the point where it didn't even feel like it, because that is what it was, if that makes sense. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, let's go play music. Like that was just assumed that that's what we would be doing every day, or listening or watching or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about your first concert and some backdrop, right? As a 5-year-old, and you are about 7 years younger than me. As a 5-year-old, my parents, within a 6-month period, took me to see the Supremes, minus Diana Ross, at the Apollo.
Wow.
That summer, they took me to see Aretha Franklin, also at the Apollo. And then that October, they took me to see the Jackson 5. Right. And I always
Where was
trace
that?
everything.
MSG or
That's
something?
MSG.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I always trace my love of music to the ways that my parents kind of, not even intentionally, exposed me to this music. Your first concert was Kiss.
Same place you saw the Jackson 5, though. So
And I need you to narrate that, and when you would have seen Kiss, well, I guess they were at kind of the height of their
yeah, it was
popularity.
79. It was right, right after the peak, but still the
after Beth,
yeah,
and so people
yeah.
really got into them.
Oh, yeah.
Mainstream after that. What was it like being you at this Kiss concert?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I got into them when I was 5. I mean, I'd actually seen a lot of live music before that, but very like, intimate live jazz in like a setting like this, or in my uncle's apartment or something like that, or like free things at the park. But this was the first like real bombastic concert I'd been to, like lights and volume and 20,000 people. But before that, so I was 7 when I went to the show. I was 5 when I saw the record on the bookshelf at the record store and just thought like, I have to have that. And I don't think
Was it because of the
it was Destroyer. It was the 4 of them. Yeah, I mean, it's still one of the best record covers of all time. And I don't think I was familiar with the music yet. I was definitely familiar with the imagery because it was, I mean, if you were a kid in the 70s, it was kind of made for kids in the 70s. So I knew the logo and I knew the makeup and everything. So my mother bought me the record and I just became completely obsessed with it. And I played drums all the time and played along to the record, and she would dress me up in Kiss makeup. And there's pictures of me like with this lumpy afro and full on Peter Criss makeup playing drums. So I was really like committed. I wanted to be in Kiss, and I thought I could. And that show just changed everything. Suddenly I was like, well, I have to be in a rock band. But to be me, I don't remember, there certainly wasn't, at that concert in particular, it wasn't like everyone here is white and I'm not. Probably because so many people were wearing Kiss makeup. I'm being totally serious. But there was a thing that I talk about in here that still is very true, that especially having a black father and a white mother, like I would look at my mom's Beatles records and think like, yeah, these guys are great, but I will never be in this band because they're super pale and have this straight brown hair. But also Stevie Wonder records. Like I'm not going to be in Stevie's band. Look how dark his skin is and how tight his afro is. Like, and weirdly, Kiss was the band that it was like, I mean, I know they're like white guys from New York, but I can put on the makeup and put on the costume and maybe I can be in Kiss. Like it was a real like identity thing for sure.
One of the things I appreciate about the book and your story is that it's not a tragic story of growing up with a single mom.
Right.
You talk about your experiences with her lovingly. And there's also a kind of, I guess we could on one hand describe as vagabond, but if we were to clean it up, cosmopolitan aspect to your growing up, because y'all are going in so many, New York, Cambridge,
Amherst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and so you're going with her as she's growing, right? She goes back to school, gets her degree while you're young, right? Your uncle is going to school, right?
Yeah.
Right, when you're
They're so young. Everyone's so young. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the relationship with your mother. And I'm going to add to this because very often when we hear about narratives about single mothers, the conversations about the missing father, right, are often shaped by a certain kind of toxicity and anger and resentment. But I don't get the sense that was part of the narrative that she ever presented to you about your father.
Yeah, it wasn't. And thank you for pointing that out and for noticing it because it is a huge part of the book. Yeah, I mean, I always knew the story. I knew how and why and when and where she got pregnant. Maybe not the details, but like I really knew that it was on purpose. She wanted to be a young single mother and that she was committed to that. And I think most importantly, and I found very few people who have a similar story who can really identify it. A lot of people want me to be mad and still get into the like, but aren't you mad he left you? And I still have to explain that you can only leave something if you're there in the first place. And he wasn't designed to be. But the big thing for me was the way that there was never once did I hear a comment like, if your dad would send us money, or if your deadbeat dad wasn't gone, like it wasn't that. And I think people still assume it was that. And it was the opposite. If he was ever talked about, which wasn't often, but both my mother and my uncle would say things like, he was a really great, talented guy who gave us you. They would say things like that. So he was framed very much in the positive. Like he did what he was supposed to do, and we're grateful for it. And so much of it too is that, and at least the first 10 years of my life living in Cambridge and New York and Amherst, I wasn't a weird kid in that there were so many kids who had single parents, who didn't have money, who were biracial or who were of different races. I lived in these like really interesting, truly diverse, great, safe places where I think that's maybe the biggest thing is I never stood out for that reason.
Did your mother ever tell you what it was about Roy Ayers? I mean, because you mentioned they went out maybe 3 times over the course of a year, and it's the 4th time.
Yeah, I know.
Where the act occurs, but when she saw him, I'm having a child from this man.
Yeah.
Right? What was it about him?
I interviewed her many times and we've still talked about it. I'll probably get an email about it tomorrow because she likes to do that. And maybe she's watching this. So my uncle, who's a musician, had met Roy a couple times. They weren't good friends, but they played together and met at jazz clubs and things. And so the story is I think it was the Village Gate in New York. My uncle and my mother were going to see a concert, not Roy, somebody else. I wish I knew who. None of them remembers, strangely. And my uncle ran into Roy, and they started talking. My uncle introduced Roy to my mother, and my mother claims that at that moment, she said, "That's the person I'm going to have my child with." And importantly, not that's the person I'm going to marry or the person I'm going to be with. That wasn't the thing. Like, that's not where she was going. And she was 20 when she met him and 21 when she got pregnant. But it was really just, she's like, he just had it. There was this aura and this charisma and this magic, and it's all those kinds of big words. And that's it. It was just like an early 70s vibe, maybe. I don't know.
And you mentioned that when you talk to your uncle about it, he's like, it was New York in the 70s, right?
That's a thing, yeah.
Growing up in the 1980s as you did, your father's Roy Ayers, you are aware that he is a black man. There is a narrative in American culture at that time, and exists still now, about the irresponsibility of black fathers.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of it is myth, right? But it is part of the social norm and how we think about black fathers in this country. So much so that we actually see black fathers who engage. For some people, it's a surprise. And then there's also the narrative, right, of just a musician being a musician.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially in the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
Did any of that kind of framing of how we think about black masculinity, right, particularly in connection to fatherhood, shape how you thought about your father?
I don't think it did too much, because the weird variable in all of this was living in those sort of perfect, idyllic places for 10 years and then moving to Salt Lake City when I was 10 from New York City. So Greenwich Village, 5th grade, 6th grade, Wasatch Elementary in Salt Lake City, Utah. But it was great. But that's a whole nother story. But what's so weird about Salt Lake is that it's so white that in a strange way, it wasn't. Of course, everyone had the same TV shows and movies and everything, but like the stereotypes didn't exist because there weren't enough. No one knew someone with a missing black father in Salt Lake. Okay. But really, like it wasn't. It's not something I felt, or that's not the question people asked. People asked, "Where's your father? Why do you have a weird name? Can I touch your afro?" There were plenty of questions people asked, but I don't think people knew enough to ask the questions you're talking about, which was maybe I was protected in a strange way from that.
And how did you answer that question about why do you have a weird name?
Yeah, my mother got it from a book. I got so sick of answering all those questions and really just always tried to kind of get out of it and be like, let's go listen to records. Like the answer was usually something to do with music.
If we had streaming services back then, you could just go, this is my uncle's song about me.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
You and your mother make a decision, or your mother makes a decision for you, because you don't become Nabil Ayers,
right,
until you were a teenager.
Mhm.
Right. Talk about why she thought it was important for you to take on Roy Ayers' last name.
Yeah, I mean, I was born Nabil Braufman, Braufman. People are laughing. There's the answer to your question. Right? But so that was my mother's name. That's my uncle's name, and it was a hard name. It was hard to spell it. I'm just hard, like, in a sort of day-to-day way. And my mother worked in HR at Fidelity Investments when I was in high school, and her job was a lot of the time that there's a huge round of layoffs. I might have skipped over all this stuff in the book. There's a huge round of layoffs, and so she basically thought, like, oh, I'm gonna be the person that fires 400 people over the next couple of months. I'm gonna use a fake name. And so she changed her last name to Blair. And so Louise Blair fired all these people, and she was like, and then started using it in other ways. She's like, wow, this is incredible. It's so easy. I just say Blair, no one asked me how to spell it, or it's only 5 letters. And I think that more than anything was the thing. So I was going away to college, graduated high school in Salt Lake City, was going to college in Washington State, at a college where I really didn't know anyone, on purpose, kind of like start fresh, do something new. And at that moment, she said, you should think about changing your name. Braufman's a hard name. It wasn't a big push, but it was like, if you'd ever consider doing it, now is a great time. You're going to sort of start a new life. You won't have to deal with changing it. And I thought about it, and I remember thinking, well, there's only one name that exists that wouldn't make me make something up. And I don't know why, for some reason, that seemed more logical, but at the time, and this is 1989, so to me, a 17-year-old in Salt Lake City, my father is almost 50. That is old. His career is over. It was in the 70s. No one asked me about him in Salt Lake City. No one knew I was related to him, or probably even knew who he was. So to me, it wasn't like, 10 years from now, everyone's going to associate me with him. It was the opposite. It didn't even occur to me that might be a thing. I thought he was done. So
Hip hop hadn't happened.
right. So I changed it, moved to Seattle. College was fine. And then starting in 1993, when I got a job at a record store in Seattle, from that second until now, that's who I am. But I didn't plan it.
You went to school in Washington State at Puget Sound.
Yeah.
You're looking for community, right? And you make a choice, right? You join a fraternity, a white fraternity, historically white fraternity.
Yeah, I mean, historically Confederate soldier white
They were
fraternity.
founded in Alabama,
Yeah.
You also get invitations to join the Black Student Union, right? And you're weighing, right, whether if you've already joined the fraternity, you're weighing whether or not to join the Black Student Union. Talk about the choices that you thought you had to make at that time.
Such a weird one. I mean, I went through it's called Rush, the process of joining a fraternity. You go to visit each house, you kind of meet people, you go for longer the next time, and there's this like ranking system where they rank you and you rank them. It's terrible. But anyway, and I kept waiting in those things. I'd seen Animal House and all the movies. I kept waiting for, like, first of all, just like, what's your father do? Who, all the really obvious questions. I was just waiting for that. I was like, this probably won't work, but I'm still going to try it. I'm new at college.
Were
Why
there
not?
any other people of color in the
Yeah,
fraternity?
there were,
Okay.
which is interesting and which surprised me because it was a pretty white school, but I almost feel like the Greek system, which I think it was 40% of the students were in fraternities and sororities, huge percentage, 3,000 person school, so pretty small. It felt slightly more diverse than the non-fraternity people, which is totally strange and not the norm. And I think each time, it's like 4 separate days, I was more and more surprised how much I got along with people, how normal it felt, and that there were some people of color. And I really kept waiting for, like, the shoe is going to drop and it's like a big prank on me.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. Join this fraternity. There's gay kids, there's Jewish kids, there's Indian kids, still mostly white, but still it wasn't, I'm the weird kid that's not white in the fraternity. I ended up being the president of the fraternity, which was hilarious. All the while, every semester, I got a call from the Black Student Union because when I applied to the school, I ticked the black box. And so I'm on the list of the people who, the 20 kids or whatever. And at every time, it feels much harder than it was. I think going to sort of think about doing the fraternity thing, I was with a huge group of friends. It felt safe. The Black Student Union thing to me felt like I'm going to go there and they're going to find out that I'm not black enough. I don't know anything about the music they're going to be into. They're not going to be into the fact that I'm in this super white fraternity. And so I never went. I was more scared to do that than I was to join the fraternity.
Fraternity.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had checked the black box. How do you process your racial identity at a time in America where lines are being drawn?
Yeah.
Who are you? Who are your people? Where you come from? How do you identify?
I wish we had more time. I mean, I still don't know. And I've talked about this a lot, wrote about it for 3.5 years. I've talked about it for the last year. I still don't have a good answer. And I think it all goes back to that time in Amherst and New York and Boston, those first 10 years when I was around so many different people of different races, and it truly didn't matter. People had cultures, and people were into who they were, but it just wasn't the thing. And then the other weird thing still about Salt Lake was like, again, because there are so few people of color, it wasn't like, well, that's the group of black kids. Do I hang out with them or do I hang out with the white kids? There was just one group of kids, and the few kids of color hung out with them. So I never had to draw a lot of the lines. I was really weirdly sheltered from a lot of the stuff that most biracial people deal with growing up. Not all of it, but some of it.
But when you were older, you did do the DNA testing.
Yeah. The DNA test was fascinating. So I found out that I think it was 34% black. The most fascinating part of that to me was like, oh, Roy Ayers is 68% black. In your head, it's like he's black. It's 100%. But obviously that's not the deal in America. So that was really fascinating and made me question everything and made me think like, oh, I'm less black than I thought I was. And then that led me to this family tree that showed me actual pictures and paragraphs about all these enslaved people and ancestors and people with my same last name. And that almost in the same day made me do the opposite and made me think, oh, I'm so much less white than I felt yesterday because I'm looking at this thing of these people I'm related to. So it's always a work in progress. And I think for a while, I wanted there to be a goal and I was looking for an endpoint as far as my racial identity, but I don't think there is. I think this is it and it's okay.
You go to Puget Sound, you're in the Seattle area at a time when Seattle is being discovered by America.
So fun.
Talk about the music scene in Seattle.
I mean, it was incredible timing. I got really lucky. It wasn't complete luck. I mean, my mother was really proactive about college. We lived in Salt Lake City. Tons of kids went to the West Coast. So we looked at schools in California and Oregon and Washington, but Seattle to me was just like, I could just tell, like, this just feels like music. Everyone's in a band. There's flyers for shows on every pole. There's so many record stores. So that's a lot of the reason I went. And then suddenly, my freshman first semester, Nirvana, Bleach, Soundgarden, Louder Than Love, first Mudhoney album, all these albums came out. I'm DJing at the college radio station. I'm going to every show. I mean, it was on. It was so much fun.
Well, before we did this conversation, you sent a note, and I'm still chuckling about it. You were warning me, I know it's the 50th anniversary of hip hop, but please don't ask me any hip hop questions.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you anything about it.
Yeah.
How did you escape hip hop in that moment when it was becoming mainstream?
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, in high school in Salt Lake City, there were definitely kids who were into rap. I mean, white kids were and are into rap always. So that it's not like it wasn't there because it was too white. It was definitely there. But I think it just like, maybe that's why it didn't speak to me. I don't know. It felt so foreign to watch, these white kids shouting Sir Mix-a-Lot lyrics in Salt Lake City. And I mean, I did like Run DMC. There were a few things that got me. I bought Raising Hell. But for the most part, I think I really just became such a guitar person. I mean, early MTV for me when I was like 10, 11 years old, when they just played videos, that's the stuff that really, but that's the stuff that really shaped me. And there's the occasional Prince video, and eventually there was Michael Jackson, but for even black arts, but mostly it was just like white guitar bands.
Big hair and guitar.
Yeah, right. And but I don't know how I escaped it. And in college, I became such a music snob because I was DJing at the college radio station, and like at a time like 89 to 93 is like, real.
You were a gatekeeper.
I guess, yeah, but like real like college music nerd time. So like So like when my friends played rap at parties, it was like, well, what's this? I'm into Drive Like Jehu and Superchunk, North Carolina. And so it really just like it just never got me at the right time and it never connected with me, or I never connected with it.
Talk a little bit about the times that you were in the company of your father. You talk about when you were young, memories of places where you met, sometimes the music, but not necessarily him. And you revisit all throughout your life these times where, usually at shows,
Yeah.
right, where
Right.
you're connected with him and how your opinions about him, not as a father necessarily, but just as a human being,
Yeah.
changes through these different interactions.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, this is how I sort of accidentally wrote the book. My wife said I was writing for fun about bands I was in and record store I owned and things like that. My wife said, "You need to write about your father and your race. That's what you care about." And that was like, I knew she was right, but it sounded really hard because I'd only met my father a few times. So I was like, I don't know how to write about him, but I'm going to try. So I started by just writing about every time I could remember meeting him. And there's the first time I really remember, which is in the book, is I'm 8 years old. Turns out my uncle ran into him on the street in New York, and Roy said, I think Alan maybe mentioned Nabil's in town or something, and Roy said, "Oh, you should bring him down to Electric Lady. I'm recording there," which is the most famous, amazing recording studio in the world. And I'm 8 years old and want to be in a band, already been a drummer for 6 years. So I was so excited to go to Electric Lady. And I talk about this, but more than anything because I knew Kiss recorded Destroyer there. And in my head, it wasn't like, I'm going to meet my father. It's like, oh my God, is Kiss going to be there when we go? Really, like not kiddingly, they weren't. And my father was, but it was super awkward. I remember it really well. We walked in, went into like one of the studios upstairs, and there was this room with all these really cool like band people hanging out, and I could see Roy through the glass in the booth, and he had headphones on, his eyes closed, and I couldn't hear him, but there's like obviously singing. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is it. This is like how it happens. And he came out and he said, kind of went down the line. He went, "You want some tempura?" And I said, "No." And then he went and asked other people if they wanted tempura. And then a few minutes later, my uncle and I were like, "This kind of feels like there's not much going on here. Let's go." And we left. And that was the whole thing. And still, to my point earlier, my uncle wasn't like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. That wasn't what we wanted it to be." It wasn't that at all. It was like, "Let's go get dinner. What do you feel like doing?" Like it was nothing. It didn't matter that he was a flake or socially awkward or wasn't nicer to an 8-year-old who he invited to the studio. There's a few more like that. I mean, about maybe 2 years later, we'd moved to Salt Lake City, and my life changed a lot. And I wasn't thinking about him, wasn't thinking about New York, but it was back one summer, and Alan and I ran into him at a music store, but I had no idea who he was. And he's like asking me questions about, it's the first time I realized later, I was like, that was the first time he actually seemed even slightly interested. And I had no idea. Like, I wish that I could go back and say, like, "Let's go to lunch, tell me more," or something. But I feel like I blew it, but I obviously didn't do anything wrong by being 11 and not knowing that the guy I was talking to was my father. But
Do you think for him it actually was about the work, that the work was a distraction to him being more attentive to you?
I don't know. I mean, he was never supposed to be attentive to me, and I still have this in my head. I have this like, that was the agreement, and I've talked to plenty of people in the last year who are like, "Yeah, but fuck him and fuck your mom for even making that agreement." And I don't know that they're wrong, but I've always looked at it as the sort of letter of the law. Like that's what he agreed to do.
There's almost some
And he
integrity
did it.
about that.
Well, almost.
In a weird way.
Right, in a weird way. But and then so that was kind of it. I didn't see him for years after that, and then I got a hold of him that time in Seattle. We had this really great lunch where I sat across from him at the table and just couldn't believe like how much like, oh, it's so weird. He laughs the same way I do, and it's like the facial gestures, like everything he's doing. This is crazy.
You
that
talked
I've
about
never.
going, "Oh, is that what I'm going to look like when I get that?"
Right, yeah, of course, yeah. And all that was really strange, and that was great. And this is all back to the parallel of the song. And the plan at that point was like, great, I lived in Seattle then. I was like, I'm in New York all the time. Let's do this again. And my thinking was like, he got off so easy. I'm 35. He's 70. I don't want anything except to like meet once or twice a year, get some more info, get some medical history. Like that's it. How lucky could he be? And to get along so well. I wasn't mad at him. He didn't apologize. Like it was like really starting fresh. And I went to the show that night, and I was blown away. And more than even watching the show, I was like, wow, look at the audience and look at these people and the way they're connecting with the music. This is magical. And then over the next year, I tried to get a hold of him many times, couldn't. He wouldn't call me back. He would kind of blow me off on the phone. Once he even like didn't understand who I was, and I had to explain it, which was terrible and awkward. And finally, he came back to Seattle a year later after that first time, and kind of wouldn't commit to anything. And at the end of the show, he kind of came walking off stage, and I was like, this sucks, but I know this is the only chance I have. He might be walking straight out to a car. So I kind of grabbed him by the shoulder and I said, hey, it's Nabil. And he just said, hey, I got to get going. And he walked off. And I remember the way I remember that show is it was terrible. And he played the songs too fast and the audience wasn't into it. And it's in my head, it's like, oh, it's obviously the music and how I feel about it. It's all one thing. It's how that day was or how that night was.
Have you talked to him at all about the book?
No, I haven't heard anything, which to me is not a surprise. I didn't think he would reach out, and I'm not surprised that he hasn't reached out. It certainly wasn't the goal. Yeah. But when it was probably 6 months from coming out and it's like the pre-order is up and it started to exist in the world, I did have this kind of worry that because he couldn't read it, or it's him, his wife, who he married soon after I was born, and his 2 children who are 2 and 4 years younger than me. That's sort of the real family, as I call it, who I'm not in touch with. I was worried that they would hear about it and assume that it's a real takedown and not be able to find out otherwise because it wasn't out yet. So I was really stressed during that like 6-month period. And so I am like loosely in touch with one of the kids who actually lives not too far from here. So I emailed him and I said, I wrote this book and it's a lot about our father and you're in it and your sister's in it and I'm not in touch with anyone. So if you want to let him know, you should. And if you want me to send you an early copy, I will. And I sent the email and it was really like, oh man, what's going to happen? Are they going to be pissed? Are they going to want to sue me or try to stop the book from coming out? And he just replied and he said, LOL, congrats. And at that point I was like, I've done everything I can. Like there's, but I don't know.
Do you have a sense of what kind of father he has been to them?
I do from him. I mean, I met with that half brother once and he wasn't really like super disparaging, but he was just like, yeah, he was gone a lot. Wasn't great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not surprising.
Are you a father now yourself?
I'm not.
Has your relationship with or non-relationship with your father colored whether or not you want to become a father?
I don't know. That it's really hard to say. I mean,
you are in the music industry too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it hasn't made me question, oh, I wonder if I'll be a bad father because he was a bad father, because I don't think he was a bad father. He was the father that he agreed to be. And so it's not that. But of course, there is this little part of me that's like, but if I did have a kid, do I have the ability to be that detached? Like, how could he have sat with me at 35 and connected and gotten off so easy and had to basically do nothing and still chosen to do literally nothing? And do I have that? And that's not good if I do.
If he was sitting here right now, would you feel the need to say anything to him?
I mean, I guess I would feel the need to say something, but I don't know what. It would be very, very awkward. Is he going to come popping out of the closet somewhere?
Okay. This is your life.
But I don't know. I mean, someone asked me recently, I've done so many book events, and the one question someone asked recently that I'd never been asked, which was really surprising and caught me off guard, was, do you want a relationship with your father? And I really was like stumped, and I don't think I do. And I just don't know what it would look like, or what I would ask him, or what I would want to tell him, or if I would trust him enough to even want either of those things. It just feels like I've gone around him so much and learned so much more about family and I know his sister and his sister's kids and my cousins. I mean, I know a lot more about the family than I think he does, because I think I've been more interested and done a lot more work. But some of the real question marks are now, answers and relationships. So that's a lot of what I wanted when I first got a hold of him, and I've still been able to get it, and I continue to get it. And so I just don't know what I actually would want from him.
Book's been out for a year. What's the response been like?
It's been great. It's been, like press and events and things like that. But more than anything, the really wild response, and the reason I keep doing these things for so long mostly, is that it keeps reaching people who are somehow connected to it or to my father or to me, meaning people who played in his band. I mean, I've hung out with half the band members from the Everybody Loves the Sunshine album in Tokyo and here in Durham. And it's amazing. And they all have great stories. And I've hung out with his tour manager from the 70s. And I have actual relatives and siblings I didn't know about. So that's been the most exciting thing to come from the book.
Does it give you a better appreciation of not him, the father, but him, the musician?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And even just the people, the occasional just Roy Ayers super fan that shows up somewhere is really fun. And it's often like, I met your father once. Like, did you ever talk to him about this? I'm like, oh no, I didn't. There's 320 pages about how I don't know him at all. And they're like, yeah, but like when you grew up with him, like there's people who just don't want to listen. It's like steamroll through it, which is also fun. Yeah.
We're going to open it up to the audience now.
I have an interesting family origin story too, in that my sons are mixed, but they're African American, Native American, Irish, and German. And the conversations, I'm going to send them this book because there's some conversations they want to have. I have no idea how to take them or where to take them.
How old are they?
They're grown men now.
Oh, wow.
But we still have conversations.
Yeah.
Child of the 60s.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Guy.
When you were growing up in New York, you said it was normal that there were a lot of families without fathers around. When you moved to Salt Lake, I hate to use the word normal because it's bullshit, but
I think I used it, though.
a typical
Yeah.
father, mother, what was that? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean,
When
Salt
did
Lake
you
was-
notice it? Were you oblivious to it, et cetera, et cetera?
Immediately. Salt Lake was, because it's like the most family place on earth. It's like, I mean, everybody had two parents. I've like almost described it like people had two heads. Like, it's like weird. Everyone has a mother and a father here. So many siblings. I mean, I had plenty of friends in high school who had, 4 or 5 siblings. And so it was, suddenly it was really like, oh, weird. I am so different than everybody here. But I did make 2 of my good friends in 6th grade. Both had divorced parents and lived with their moms. And I always wonder, I'm not in touch with them, like how and why we connected. And maybe if we weren't talking about it. So I'm not sure how it actually happened, or if maybe we somehow just gravitated towards each other for that reason. But yeah, I mean, so normal family. Yeah.
Hello. You talked a little bit about how you kind of were tracing your family's history and genealogy and things like that. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what that process was like. And like, I know especially for Black people, it can be a little bit difficult to trace it. You hit lots of roadblocks and stuff like that. And so if you could talk about some of the challenges you faced during that process, even as it maybe pertained to like reaching out to relatives.
Yeah, it's a wild story, and a lot of this is in the book. But what happened is I did 23andMe in 2018, really to just like see if it would lead to something. I didn't know what, but I just felt like I'm never going to learn anything more from my father. So this is maybe one way to see if I can find more. And a cousin reached out, like third cousin, like not very close relative, and he just said, because you can like, if you opt in, you can connect to people in these DNA sites. And I did, because I wanted to connect with people. And he said, I have an heirs family tree you might want to see. And so he emailed me this document. It's a scan of a family tree that it looks like a fanzine. It's like a Xeroxed thing from 1963. It's like 20 pages. It has a paragraph and a picture of everyone. And it starts with this one guy, Isaac Ayers, who was born in 1824 and enslaved in Ashland, Mississippi. And it's totally so crazy to suddenly have this thing. It wasn't actually printed out, but I'm still acting like it was. It's on the screen, and it's every generation, and at the end is a family tree as of 1963, and it has my father's name, and it has his three sisters and his parents. That's all info. At least I got those names from him the time I met him. So I knew, I was like, oh, this is wild. Like, I would be right here. And this thing goes all the way up to this guy in 1824. And this is a very long story, and I won't tell the whole thing, but I tried to research him more, the first ancestor. And of course, like you said, total dead end, couldn't find anything. But it talked about the slave owner named Dr. Ayers in this very small town, started researching him and really easily found more on him, found a woman named Karen Ayers who appeared to be his living descendant, and her email address just happens to be on this site. So I emailed her and just said, this is a long time ago. I'm not after anything. You didn't do anything. I'm really just trying to learn more. Yeah, it's a crazy email to send, and I would imagine a crazier one to get. And she was incredibly receptive, emailed right back. She's in her 60s. She lives in Texas. She's wonderful, happens to be a hobby genealogist who knows all this stuff, had paperwork, had tons of info, and was super helpful. And have corresponded via email for 5 years. We met for the first time a couple weeks ago in Texas, and I interviewed her and filmed it. She's great. So you should do that. Do the DNA test if you haven't.
Has your uncle been a sort of father figure to you?
Has he? Oh, definitely, completely. Yeah, still is. I'm going to hang out with him next week in New York, and he's amazing. And yeah, really the person that got me into music and paid for things and spent time and energy supporting me. So 100%.
Was it difficult to get publishers interested in this project?
No, I was shocked because I spent years in bands and now work for a record company, but where it's always like, I'm going to get you a record deal. And it just, it did happen a couple times, but it was never as easy as everyone acted. And the books are so weird because you have to have a literary agent first. And so I got a literary agent relatively easily, and she was really confident. And she was like, I'm going to send this to 5 editors who I think will like it. It wasn't the whole book. It was like 2 chapters and a sort of summary thing. But I'm going to send it to 5 people. Depending on their feedback, if they all aren't into it, then we haven't gone that wide. We'll tweak the proposal and change it up and send it to more people. And she was like really transparent about it. She would just forward me these emails, and there were these very long, friendly no's from I Google these people and they're huge, whatever, heads of publishing companies. And it's like, thank you so much for sending Nabil's wonderful proposal. We loved it, but we already have a Black person writing a book next year, so we're not interested or whatever. Kind of. And then she calls me and she's like, yeah, there's this woman from Viking who wants to talk. And me being like a social person in New York, I was like, but aren't we all in New York? Let's go get drinks or lunch or whatever. And she's like, no, it's a call. And we had this long conference call, and then she made an offer on the book like a week later. It was really crazy. I feel very lucky. And it was a great experience with her too, which is even more unusual.
Are you going to do another one?
I'd like to, but I don't. I felt no pressure with this because I was sort of doing it in secret without anyone knowing. But now people ask me that question. I would say yes if I had to do a yes or no, but I'm not working on another book. There's not a definite goal, but I have been writing a lot about everything that's happened as a result of the book, and that strangely could be an interesting next thing, but we'll see. But I want to.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
70s baby from
All right.
Long Island, New York.
Oh, really?
I think my first concert was Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Where? Nassau Coliseum?
Yes.
Amazing.
But my question actually is, did your mother ever fall in love?
She did. She's married to her husband, Jim. I went to her wedding, her first and only wedding, when I was in college. And they're still together and happy and adorable. And really, looking back, and she would say this, she was never in a relationship when I was growing up. Her thing is like, and as soon as I went away to college, she found this guy that she's in love with, and they're still together. So it was really like all about me for those 18 years.
I have a quick question. I'm right here.
Oh, it's you. Hey.
Yeah. I wonder, me myself, I'm mixed, and I did not grow up with my dad. He's Mexican. And so it wasn't just the missing of a familial relationship, it was also the missing of a cultural doorway. For you, have you ever conceptualized in the multiverse of possibilities of what your life could have been, how you would have been as a person if you had grown up with a Black father in the home?
Yeah, with my same mother and a Black father in the home.
With Roy, yeah.
Wow, I've never thought about that, really. I mean, it's so strange because he's so not a part of my life that there's never a fantasy what if he was here? Because it's not something I wished for. But I mean, I doubt we would have moved to Salt Lake. I mean, I imagine his career would have taken precedent, and so we would have been in New York. I'm really putting this together in real time. This is I have no idea. But so in that sense, I think it would have made a lot more sense. It would, but it's not, it still might not have been easy. I mean, I think that I've met lots of biracial people, especially in the last year, who talked about how hard it's been to sort of not fit in with anyone and feel torn between the two parents and which kids to hang out with at school and all that stuff. And so it's entirely possible that would have been my upbringing and that it would have been really hard, which would have been harder than the one I did have. So it's hard to imagine, but I'm guessing that would have been part of it.
What box do you check now?
I check Black.
Okay.
Yeah. But not with confidence and not without super thought,
No, I get it.
why is there a box and why is there only one and
No, I
all
get
that stuff. Yeah.
I absolutely get that. Other questions?
First, for a second.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's pretend that Roy and after that lunch, you all had a relationship.
Yeah.
And you got your literary agent and you wrote a book. How is that book different than this book?
Oh, whoa. So 15 years ago-ish, we did have the coffee or lunch every year or so, and that continued, and then I wrote the book.
Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, there's part of me that thinks there wouldn't be one, that I wouldn't have any. I mean, because in that multiverse, I imagine I got everything I wanted. And why would you write a book if you got everything you wanted? Kind of. I think there's less conflict, less for me to work through like I did on this. So I think I kind of think that's what would have happened is nothing.
Could just be another book about Seattle in the early 90s.
Yeah, just grunge. Yeah. Huh. Good one.
Does it sadden you at all that you, at this point, don't need anything from him?
A little bit. This is going to sound really, I guess, egotistical, but it saddens me for him that he doesn't want a little bit of a relationship with me, especially after how easy I think I made it. How the hardest thing had to have been that lunch in Seattle, and to get through that and realize wow, I made it for him. That's how I would think he would be thinking. And I also think weirdly, I am just a teeny bit surprised that his ego and need for attention hasn't been enough to pop up and want to feel slightly associated with all of this too. Yeah. I mean, I got his face on the cover of the New York Times opinion section on Father's Day. No publicist ever did that.
Are there any other questions?
Would you consider a book with the Ayers family that were the owners way back when? Or have you had a chance to meet, besides that woman, any of the other family members?
There's another guy who lives here who I haven't been able to get a hold of on this trip, but when I was here a year ago, he's a very serious genealogist. He was I did a book event here a year ago. Mike, you were there. I don't know if anyone else was there. And he's in his 90s, but that would be fascinating to sort of the both sides and try to trace it all back. Yeah, and he's got stacks of paper and grids, and he's like, here's where you are. You're the missing box. And if it's really fascinating. So That would be pretty fun. I mean, the whole key to this is Karen doing a DNA test. That will open up all kinds of information. And to me, I almost don't want her to do it because it really doesn't matter. And so I kind of don't want to know because I don't want it to change how I think about things. But I also kind of do want her to do it. Yeah.
There are copies of My Life in the Sunshine, which we are offering for free. And Nabil has graciously offered to sign them. So we'll slide into the next segment, the book signing.
Amazing.
And of course, grab some food so we don't have to take any of it home. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Appreciate it.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all, we taking it back.